Welcome once again to the Radical Imagination. I'm your host, Jim Bretos. I'm a sociologist who's taught at John Jay College of Criminal Justice and Yeshiva University here in New York City. Eugene Fodor was a violin virtuoso and a master interpreter of the modern and classical repertoire. He made his solo debut with the Denver Symphony at 10, began touring at the age of 12, and won numerous competitions in his teen years. In 1972, at age 22, he won first prize in the Paganini International Competition in Italy. And 2 years later, at the height of the Cold War, he was the first violinist from the Western world to win the highest honors in Moscow's prestigious international Tchaikovsky competition. He became a national sensation, young, handsome, supremely talented, universally admired for his awe-inspiring violin technique and interpretations. Called the Mick Jagger of classical music, Eugenius, and a cowboy fiddler. He appeared on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson 14 times, the Grammy Awards, music festivals around the world, and played before 2 presidents at the White House and at 2 World Summit conferences. Gene grew up on a ranch near Denver and had a special connection with horses. He could stand on a horse, play the violin impeccably while he was standing and riding it. He was down to earth, cocky and rebellious, vulnerable, irreverent, difficult and irascible, funny, warm, giving of himself and his music. He was a people's musician and opened up an often stuffy, stodgy classical music world to many who had never been interested in it before, in ways that few musicians and artists were ever able to do. I met and talked with Josh Rabel, perhaps our greatest American violinist today, who told me that Gene was one of his heroes as he was moving up the violin in the violin world. Gene was also a tormented soul. His problems with substance abuse never completely at bay. He had his critics and was used and abused by a ruthless business that tried to crush or control him for their ego and money-making purposes. His demons eventually won the battle, and Gene passed on February 26, 2011, 11 years ago today, a week short of his 61st birthday. We're thrilled and blessed to have Gene's wife, Susan Davis, on the show for this special commemoration of Gene and his life. She was there in the early days. They were married from 1978 to 1985 and remarried in 2010. She saw him through his final days with love, tenderness, and much patience. Gene was a dear friend, a kindred soul, and comrade for over 20 years. I miss him very, very much. His life force and energy and sense of fun, his love and radical imagination. Before we bring Susan on, let's play a brief 1975 profile of Gene.
In Turkey Creek, Colorado, there is a young man who lives on a ranch. Like many other young men, he enjoys horses, his favorite dog, the out of doors. His name is Eugene Fodor. He plays the violin. Eugene grew up in a musical family. By the age of 7, he was playing the violin. Eugene entered the 1974 Tchaikovsky competition in Moscow. He stunned the judges, shared top honors, and became an international celebrity. Airports and busy travel schedules are routine. Eugene travels the world 9 months of the year to reap his ultimate rewarding experience, playing the violin. Recently, he performed for the president at the White House. Arriving in St. Paul, Minnesota, Eugene goes directly to the home of his accompanist for the recital.
Because it's kind of hard to get ahead of it.
They have never met before and have little time to rehearse.
From here? I'd like to go from here, okay?
The violin Eugene plays is a Guarnerius, made in 1736.
It's always a question of where. It's marked here, but I usually take it right here.
That's what I meant to say.
I lead it right here.
Yeah, a little more than that. And you want to go da-da-dum, da-da, da-da.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
The next afternoon, Eugene refines the edges of his performance. He has studied with several masters of the violin, including Jascha Heifetz.
I jog about 3 miles a day near my home. I feel that playing the violin is a total experience, and one should be in top shape physically in order to produce the best results. I enjoy riding horses and jogging and swimming and scuba diving. I usually ride every day when I'm home. Shahzada is an Arabian mare, and I've had her about 2.5 years. I have other horses too, but she is my favorite.
Finally, all the preparation and rehearsal come together on the evening of the recital. The climax of the evening is Caprice Basque by Pablo de Sarasate, a piece rarely performed due to its extreme difficulty.
I'm so happy to see you. It's been a while. I'm so glad you're able to make the show, and we'll talk a little about Gene here. And thank you very, very much for doing this. It's really wonderful. I love having you on the show. It's a blessing.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Nice to see you too.
Absolutely. And so, gosh, you were there. Let's start at the beginning. I mean, you met Gene. Where is it? In a mountain town, appropriately in a mountain town in Colorado, right?
In Central City, Colorado.
Central City.
They used to they used to have summer opera programs. It was amazing. Now it's a little gambling place, but it was held in an old Western town opera house. And I
Yeah.
was sitting waiting for my father. I was 14, waiting for my father to
14.
get
Okay.
the tickets. And this guy comes running out carrying a violin case and then comes back and is just standing there staring at me. And finally he says, "Where did you buy that dress?" And I said, "Why? Do you want one?" And then my father saw me and had that look of a father, who's this guy talking to my daughter, and comes over. And then we go down to meet my mom, and Gene comes running after us and says, "Sir, sir." And he introduces himself. My mother had heard him play with the Denver Symphony since he was very, very young. And so she was very taken. And Gene is asking my dad if we can have lunch. And my father says, "Yeah, here's my business card." And he says, "No, I met with your daughter."
All right.
This day, I never asked my parents a question. What were you doing letting your 14-year-old daughter go out with a guy 20 years old? But anyway, I guess I was.
Wow. So and so it was the dress. It was the dress, and you, of course, obviously, and he was just taken aback. Now, again, this is really a little. Having spent some years in Colorado myself, this is a real little small little western town up there, and as you say, there's an opera house. So this was and a lot of people from Denver and all over would come to. So was he playing there, or was he just?
He was going to have a concert, so he was there for a rehearsal for the concert. And so they did have like a music festival type thing going on in the summer. And the opera house was famous for having this lady painted in the floor. And
the barroom floor, right? The
Yeah.
lady on the barroom floor, right? Okay. And then there's a little ghost town next to it, Black Hawk, and who knows what it's all like. I haven't been back there for many years, but so wonderful. So you have lunch, and just again, what sort of happened?
That day, no. We went to the opera, and then he called, and we got together. He taught me how to play chess. I'd never played before, and I beat him because he was kind of whisked away. And then I went away to school. I went to school at Interlochen Arts Academy for voice, and I still sing. And so we kept in touch there. And the more we thought about each other, we learned a lot about each other, writing letters. Back then we wrote letters.
Yeah.
And I still have some of those letters. And then my parents, when I came back for Christmas break, had tickets to him playing Tchaikovsky violin concerto. And so then everything started from there. After the concert, I went backstage. His violin teacher, Harold Whippler, he whispered something in his ear, and I found out later he whispered, could he please take his date home because he wanted me to go to the dinner. So there I was, 15 years old, at a dinner with Arthur Fiedler and Eugene, and it was amazing.
I have the CD here. Tchaikovsky, well, not with Fiedler. Tchaikovsky, Mendelssohn, violin concertos, Fordorf, Leinsdorf, and Maag. Yeah.
Mhm.
So he played with the best symphonies, with the best conductors. He was this incredible sensation. I mean, tell our audience, tell us how that must have been at such a young age to be involved with this fellow that was rocking around the world here and so on. And it must have been unbelievable. Tell us a little about how that was. And
well, the summer after we met, when he won the Paganini competition.
Right.
And then shortly thereafter, the Tchaikovsky, and that's when everything just took off.
Right.
He got, second prize in the Tchaikovsky. And so that became an interesting ride because people would follow him all over. You could go anywhere and people knew who he was because of Johnny Carson. And he probably was responsible for bringing classical music to so many people. We would go to concerts in Atlanta and they'd have to add an extra, they'd have a season with 3 nights and they'd have to add an extra concert because there were so many people who wanted tickets to the concerts. And then you get there and they had set up chairs outside of the concert hall.
Wow.
with speakers set up because they oversold so many tickets. It was incredible. And then also lots of women following him around.
Yeah, right. Well, he was of course you are and a very attractive woman, and he was a very handsome, young, dashing man here, a celebrity, and so how were those early years? You got married, you had children. Uh, when was
Well,
your
we
first
got
child?
married. We got engaged at the Russian Tea Room in New York, and then we got married shortly, like on July 3rd, July 2nd, because we met on July 2nd in Central City, and so then we had 3 children in 3 years. But with Daniela, our firstborn, we went on the road with her. So I literally had her. We had birthing kits and everything to have a home birth in the towns we were in. And then I was 2 weeks past my due date. We were at the Grammy Awards. And my father was so upset because I wore this red dress and he was afraid I'd go into labor on national television. But we had Daniela, and 2 weeks later, I went on the road with him with the baby. And so that was how we started.
So now you're living in New York. Is
At
that
that point, yes, we were living in New
and
York
that,
then.
not far from where I live? I live on around
The Upper
98th
West
and
Side.
Riverside.
Yes.
So, well, of course, I didn't know you then, but that was so you were a New Yorker for several years,
Yes.
um, and so tell me about Gene's mood at that time. Was he? I mean, he was always ebullient. He was always full of energy and life. Things were going his way, wasn't it, for his
Oh,
career?
yes, and he would take walks in Central Park, and then once he met the guys from the band Devo, and they were doing a summer concert in the park, and he ends up playing with them at one point, for fun, one concert, and he would meet people wherever he went. Whether he was on an airplane or he was in a restaurant or he was in the park, because he was very personable.
Yeah.
So
But Susan, what do you think? Look, what was that about? He was a child prodigy. He
yes.
was, I mean, pretty much kept in seclusion, practicing as a child. He wasn't, as I understand, he wasn't allowed to date, or this was it. I mean, this is serious business. So, do you think that when the opportunity availed itself, I mean, opening up that big world out there, and how did he handle it? As you say, it's very personal.
What happened is that, yeah, his father was very hard on him, and when he found a rock and roll record once in his bedroom, his father broke the records and
Yeah.
held him down and shaved his head. And this was when he was like in ninth grade. So he had to go to school, or maybe 10th grade. He had to go to school with his head shaved. His father was very cruel to him a lot of times. And I think he spent his life trying to get his father's acceptance. So when he went to New York, when he was accepted into Juilliard for their violin program after the Heifetz masterclass, uh, he he would play, and they'd assign a concerto on Monday that he would come back on Friday, and the other violinist would be stunned because he would not use any music. He would just know it really well and play great, but then he would party a lot, and he actually got involved with heroin at that time, and ended up having to leave New York so that he could get clean. And so when I met him, he had gone through all of that, and then he ended up. When I met him, he didn't drink or smoke or do any drugs at all. He was extremely clean. He just practiced and practiced and practiced, and then went to the competitions.
I did meet his father a number of times. I back up what you're saying. I didn't meet his mother. Seemed very, very passive or out of the picture much, but the father really did push him. I think it was a Beatles album that he broke that he was listening to. But yeah, and then one Christmas, Gene said that his father gave him a lump of coal or something because he did something wrong.
He was 8 years old. All his cousins, his brother and sister. Well, I don't think his sister was born yet, but they all got candy in their stocking, and they actually gave him coal in his stocking. And I think maybe Gene was somewhat spectrumy. If he was born nowadays, he probably would have gotten a lot of early intervention to just help with maybe hyperactive or high performing spectrum stuff. But they didn't understand him because he
Yeah.
wouldn't sit still in the classroom. He he was a bad boy, but he wasn't bad. He was just full of energy and life, and they didn't know how to deal with it.
That is a profound point. I really, really appreciate your input there. And I just, to go back, when we met at a concert, I think it was at Colorado Women's College or something, at Denver Women's College, and his father was there too. And I remember afterwards, Gene was very gracious and introduced his father to a few people and said, and the father again said, well, he learned everything from me. He never gave him credit, and I agree with you. I think that this pushing, this incessant pushing and pressure, although Gene so much loved the music, and when he met all the people and how he could make people so happy, I think that the all-enveloping love and energy took over. But I think you're absolutely right. I think that he would have been helped at this point if he was, starting today, and there would be more understanding of that. And I think he would have continued on his life and his career for many, many years. It's very sad that didn't happen.
And when we got married, his parents were very angry because they had controlled all his money. And I found out that when his father would fly to concerts, he would pay himself thousands of dollars. And he did have a warm side, his dad did, but these are people who never ever met their grandchildren. They never gave them a gift. They never gave me anything, like congratulated me that we had kids. And it was like they were very bitter when I came into the picture because they lost control. And Eugene was heartbroken because he wanted his father's acceptance. And his father was someone who wanted always to be a violinist. And he definitely had something to do with his brother and him being so involved with music, but he did not do the work, but yeah.
Gene's brother, Gene's brother, John,
yes,
who became a violinist in the Denver Symphony, but who has since retired, right? He's still
he's a serious
addict as well. So so there's
just a lot of pain that was never addressed, and the mother was just very passive in the background.
Yeah, but you'd never know it when he played. And again, we're playing a number of clips for this show, and so it never came out in his music. All you saw was this exuberance, this love of life, and the depth of his commitment to that music, and to reach into the soul of the great masters. I know that we're going to be playing a clip also of him playing this, I guess considered the greatest violin ever made, the Granarius, and we're going to show that as well on the show here. But our audience will see the enthusiasm he had for this, and of course, his middle name is Nicholas, right? So he was named after Paganini.
Well, it's amazing because when he played that violin, they would not. The only way they allowed that violin to come to this country and be played was if Eugene played it. In Italy, they called him the reincarnation of Paganini, and in Italy, women wept and washed his feet in the streets after the Paganini competition that he won.
Yeah, he told me that. So that's you're validating that story. I said, "Oh, come on, Gene." And nobody, all right, yeah, they were at his feet, right? He said they were kissing his feet after this concert. Well, the Italians take their violin seriously, obviously.
Well, we wish that we had more of this in our own country. Maybe not to that degree, but to at least be exposing children in schools to the great masters in art, music. And it's so sad to me that they don't have that exposure. And there's also even studies that a lot of what's happening in other worldly music today, that it affects our brains differently. It's a different resonance. And you hear with classical music, it builds our brain and it builds our passion and it builds our emotions. So and I do help teach music appreciation in some different outlets to expose kids to the greatness of classical music.
And he did teach. He had a number of master classes, correct?
Yes.
And I remember at the University of Colorado, a friend of his or something, or one of the professors there just said, "Hey, would you come talk to my class about classical music?" And he just said, "Yeah, sure." And it was the most riveting class. I mean, there were hundreds of students, and he was talking about, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember here exactly what it was, but it was about a concerto and the different rhythms and the timing and the emotion that was involved and the final breakthrough and the catharsis. And Gene made certain sexual references as well to that. And it was very exciting. It was very sensual, and it was very, very poignant. This is not, your usual classical violinist speaking. And that's part of his charm and part of his down-to-earthness that was so appealing.
He was amazing communicating to all people about music with a passion and enthusiasm that was unmatched, but especially to young people. He could just really engage second and third and fourth graders because of his approach, and he knew how to grab them. But it was because his passion was real. When people would ask who his favorite composer was, he would say the one I'm playing at the moment. He would never answer the question because that was truly true. What was in his heart while he was performing, that was his favorite composer at that moment.
Yeah. Do you want to touch a little bit on the business angle of this business? I met one of his agents. I name names here. I wrote a letter to Isaac Stern on behalf of Gene. We both wrote it, and helped facilitate a meeting, a rapprochement with Stern, who brought him into Juilliard. And I mean, let's be very blunt about this too. This is a ruthless business, and branding people and control. You're talking about his father's control. We know about the Hollywood moguls who try to control the actors and actresses, the football owners, the baseball owners, and so on. Well, that existed, as you know, in the music world. Isaac Stern was the epitome of that. And if you didn't do things his way, there were all sorts of consequences. And Gene was rebellious. He did. And so speak a little about that, the way in which these artists can be tossed up to the side if they're not seen as profitable enough, or if you're not doing what they exactly want you to do.
That happened early on because when he won the Kiwanis national competition, Isaac Stern talked about him in a New York Times article. Yeah. And then when he was going to Meadowmount and some of those summer camp programs, he asked to study with Galamian and Gingold and refused to study with Stern. And it wasn't that he didn't like Isaac Stern, it's that he didn't appreciate Isaac Stern's style. It's a different style. It's more of a slide up to the note style. He liked the dynamic, hit the note right on, Heifetz style. And so that very early on, he offended Isaac Stern, even in some interviews, not by ever diminishing his playing and his talent, but by just saying he preferred the dynamic style of Jascha Heifetz. And he liked Gingold and Galamian. So I think that early on, that ruffled Stern's feathers. And so they were annoyed. And they also didn't like that they thought that he wasn't helping by having the image he had, like standing on a horse and being a cowboy and doing all the things that he took part in, having a huge life beyond being in the city with a violin. And I think they found that kind of uncouth. But they should have appreciated it because it was through his differences that brought more and more people to classical crowds. And we all know that we have diminishing audiences. And if we want to inspire new generations and more people to attend, it helps to have a diverse group of people representing classical music. So like Beverly Sills brought many people to opera that never would consider going to opera through the Johnny Carson show and other things she did publicly. And some people thought that was shoddy to go on Johnny Carson. But that's Eugene did that everywhere he went. We would be out sometimes and we would be hiking in the mountains and he'd start playing his violin and people would hear it that had never heard music like that before. That would inspire them to learn more about it and to look at the Denver Symphony or the Atlanta Symphony or the New York Symphony and go to concerts they'd never considered to go to before.
Yeah.
So they should have appreciated it because we need to reach more people.
That's a great point. It really, really is. That's how I met him. Actually, I was walking into the apartment where I lived, and I just heard this incredible music coming from one of the apartments. I think it was on the 5th floor, and I just stopped and just had to listen. And until he was finished. And then I think I went up and I just knocked on the door and we found out we were both from Denver and spent time there. And he was just, again, so open and giving and his love of life, his love of music and love of people was so apparent. Sometimes you can have too much of that too, as you're pointing out. How did you all, now he's trying to carry on a career. You've got 3 kids. It must have been very difficult, those early years.
It was, except we had people helping, and we got divorced shortly after my son was born. So, and he was not involved with his kids. He really didn't see them much. He saw them 7 times in 18 years. So when he came living to me when he was sick, that helped the kids be able to kind of connect with him more. Because a lot of the time when he came to see me over those 7 times, it was because he had a concert in town. He mostly wanted my attention, not to give attention to them. So that was very sad. But he didn't have a good example of how to be a father. He didn't have a good example of how to connect. And I don't think that it's that he was being selfish or not being involved as much as I think he didn't believe he could be good at it. I think it terrified him. So I think it was more that. And I would say just be you. They want to hear your stories. They want to know you. And even when, I'd ask if he wanted them for a short time in the summer, like 1 at a time, so he could know them. He would never do that. So that's not a good part of his life.
It's not, Susan. And it's
very different than like a banker that doesn't pay child support that's in the same place all the time. Eugene was traveling a lot. He had no example of what a loving, nurturing family is. It was all like the strict, not God is love, but you better do what the Bible says or what God says or what the church says or you'll burn in hell forever. It was like the fire and brimstone. And then his father and then his passive mom. He didn't have any idea of nurturing, loving, accepting, unconditional love.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying.
Be able to do that with his own kids. That's all.
I understand that. Although I must say the last couple of years when he was sick, I also knew him. He stayed here as well. But he did talk to me about his kids and how proud he was. And so, as you know, and I think that's what we should also say toward the end there, he began to understand all of that.
Oh, absolutely. And he did try hard to connect with them in the end. And luckily they were open to that. In the world we live in now, people thought I was crazy to let him come be with me that last year and a half. But the fact was, he was the father of my children and the love of my life. And I mean, it's very hard to go from that kind of a dynamic person, even though if it's the whirlwind of incredible high energy love or being kicked in the stomach, it's still hard to ever replace something like that. He was my first great love. And it was important to me that I take care of him and that I get to be with him and that the children get to know their father, the side of their father, the intimate side of their father. And that did happen in that last year and a half, 2 years.
It did. And it did till the very last moment, didn't it?
He even met his two grandsons.
Pardon me?
He even met the two grandsons.
Yeah, the two right. And
little Dylan, who really had his chiseled jawline and things. So, yeah.
right.
And Joe was great with kids, which is why it is really heartbreaking that he didn't believe that he could really fill that role, when I know he could have, but I think it was the burden he was carrying. He was emotionally tortured, and he was tortured his whole life. That's why he would do extreme things. Like if it wasn't drugs, it was a macrobiotic diet. Then he'd break the diet by eating a 2-pound steak. And then, it was all extremes.
Yeah, it was. I was there for his
Which diet?
The diet too. Yeah, he had me on a cayenne,
and the lemonade cleanse with the cayenne pepper in it. And,
cayenne pepper almost killed me on that. But also the involvement with Gourmet, and we went up to the retreat there, and I remember we got Darshand or whatever it's called, by Peacock Feather, and he took it very seriously.
He did. He had a meditation room in his house.
Right. I asked him, well, what does this mean? What did Gourmet tell you? And he said, he was sort of a little mixed on this. He said, well, she said I should take care of you or make sure that everything is okay with you for eternity. And he wasn't that pleased that he would have to sort of, in a way, you know what I'm saying? It was sort of joking, but I didn't take it that seriously. But I mean, he did. He took this very seriously. He took the devotions and his commitment to that. What I wanted to get at was that last night, where, when he passed on. I mean, before I get to that too, I remember going to a concert in Denver with him, and it was just, as just the audience, the outpouring of the love and admiration was so extensive. And then drove home. I dropped him off or whatever, and he started crying, and he showed me a book, and it was Forever Lonely. That was what he had been reading. And even in the height, he had everything. He felt that way. And so the last night you and him were together, right? You told me this, that he went to the restroom in the middle of the night. And what did he say to you? What did he ask you? Do you remember?
Oh, no, he asked me if I loved him.
Yes.
And
Do you still love me?
Said, yes, of course I love you. I'll always love you. And then, cleaned him up and put him back into bed. And then the next morning it was like 8:30 in the morning, and he would get up really early. Usually he'd be up all night because that's what happens when people have bad cirrhosis. And so he was still in bed, and I couldn't believe it. So I went in there and I said, oh, he's still sleeping. And then I get to the door. I said, what if he died? And he had died, and it was horrible, but at least he died at home.
He died at home, and the last words were, you.
Do you love me?
From you. I love you. I will always love you. And that was the same thing that happened when he first saw you in that dress, or whatever dress you were wearing at 14. I mean, it was, in a way, love at first sight. And
I was, he would always call me when there were problems in his life. He would call me about emotional things. But it was heartbreaking for me because he would never just come home. And then when he came home, it was because he was dying. We didn't know he was dying at the time, but it was, he was dealing with the withdrawals and all of that. And it was very hard. And he had lots of people he couldn't trust that were close to him, like his own sister, So it was heartbraking.
Yeah, I don't know how much we need to get into that too. No, but you're right. And there were people stabbing her, taking all kinds of stuff at the very end, and it was very messy and
yeah, right. All different people.
All different people. Leave it at that. But what I want to still say is he was playing still very well, wasn't he? Until what, 5, 6, 7, 8 years before his death? I mean,
Oh, he was still playing until he went into the hospital in Colorado. Before he came to me, he was still playing, and he had concerts coming up in other countries. And it was hard because he would tell them, "Oh, I'll be there in May," and I'd have to call him back and say he's not going to be there in May because he hasn't played for 6 months. He's not right now, unless there's a miracle. He's not going to get on a plane and come to Russia.
yeah,
He still had concerts though, and he still played. But the last year, no.
yeah.
But it is a marvelous thing, the tape you referred to earlier, when I think it was a Today Show, when they had him on with the Guarneri del Gesù with
Yeah.
Paganini violin. And that is like when you see him at his best, because he was well spoken, he was articulate, you could just see the love he had for this music and for his art. It was incredible. He would annoy people like pianists by saying the best music is written for the violin, but he loved it with such a passion. And I think that really brought it out, when him being able to hold that violin was like a little kid in a candy store, even more. But the little boy in him never disappeared. You see that coming out when he's in those thrilling moments.
Yeah, no. Our audience, we will be showing that clip, and you'll see that effusiveness there. Total little boy. I mean,
part of his charm and part of the annoyance, because
very
he couldn't grow up, but he reminds me of Mozart in the movie Amadeus. The way he acted, but at the same time, I think that's a sad thing culturally, because we never should lose a child in us. Women should still be able to go out and be girls. Men should be able to be boys. Because you lose that childlike enthusiasm, you're missing out on a lot of life. It's important to not lose that childlike enthusiasm. I like to think I have a lot of it still.
You do, I can tell. And I've had more than my share of talk about childlike food fights with Gene. And
Yes.
I remember we set up a very wonderful, beautiful concert that he played in East Hampton, at a synagogue there. And I remember a bunch of us went out to a fancy restaurant afterwards, and there was Gene. There was Gene across the table throwing some sweet potatoes at me.
Oh no.
And I told him, I said, don't do this. Don't do this. There comes another one. I said, okay, that's 2. Don't do it. One more. I said, okay. I took up a big wad of my own sweet potatoes, hit him right in the face, and he loved it. Now everybody in the fancy posh place was looking, wondering what the hell was going on, but it was fun. Yeah, it was fun, and he had that energy and he had that love to go from playing such serious, wonderful music to again enjoying life as a kid and the exuberance he had for animals, and nature. Please talk about that, because he always kept himself in great shape too, right? And he was a hiker. He was a lover of nature and his horses. Tell us about that.
And he loved animals. He loved his dog. He loved cats. He loved animals. He loved my canaries. I Spanish timbrado canaries. He loved them. And his horse, though, that was a special relationship. That's probably he's felt as enthused and excited being on the back of a horse as he did playing a violin. Mm-hmm. He loved the wildness of it and the freedom of it. And of course, then you could literally run up and down mountainsides without much fencing in between in Colorado. So the riding was great where he lived up there in Turkey Creek.
And he would literally ride these horses. I mean, 30 miles an hour. You could really get up some speed on them. 30, 40 miles. I mean, this is on the side of a mountain here. I mean, that's really that's quite a performance, to put mildly. I'm looking at the time, Susan. We only have a couple more minutes. I want to make sure that we'll do this again. We'll do another show maybe in the summer. But I want to get your last words here. Anything else that you'd like to get across to our audience here the last minute or two that we have?
In the most positive way, I'd like to state that he was probably one of the most underappreciated violinists or musicians of his time. And that was politics getting in the way. So it's really great to have an opportunity to express that and to also enjoy his music. I mean, I'm not seeing what you're playing right now, but I know people will when this comes out. And I think that it's great to bring his music back. Sometimes when he's playing on the radio, I know it's him because he had a dynamic style that is uncomparable. Not that there aren't beautiful things about other violinists, there are, but he definitely had a dynamic style that was unmatched. And even Jascha Heifetz wrote in his autobiography in the front cover to Eugene, who is now the greatest violinist in the world. Even though he'd ousted Eugene from his master class when he found out he wore a wig and didn't cut his hair during his.
But Gene played a piece that Heifetz wouldn't even play.
Right.
And
Heifetz accused him of knowing it before. Heifetz assigned it to him, and he said on a Tuesday, and it had to be prepared by Friday. And Eugene came in with no music because Eugene loved to show off, kind of cocky, and played that. And he Heifetz got very angry and accused him of having had that in his repertoire for years. He said, "There's no way you just learned that piece."
Amazing.
Yes.
Susan, thank you so very, very much. Here's a couple of Witch's Brew.
Yes.
Here's Virtuoso.
Yes. I play them in the car, and his little 5-year-old granddaughter always asks to hear him play.
Lalo, Romancing the Violin also.
Yes. Yes.
Susan, again, I just really want to thank you so very, very much for doing the show with me. It's been a great honor. I love you very much, and thank you so very much again.
Nice to be able to think of these memories. Thank you.
Absolutely. Let's do it again.
Have a beautiful time. Bless you.
You too.
Thanks.
Bless you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. And thank you so very, very much for watching us here on this special commemoration for the life and work of Eugene Fodor. This is Jeff Meadows. I'll see you again next week on The Radical Imagination.
And before we go this morning, we want to tell you about a concert performed in California yesterday. As NBC's Bob Faw tells us, there was a special presence on stage.
Last night, as Eugene Fodor played, a spirit seemed to descend on San Francisco's Herbst Theater. But this ghost was full-bodied, and all that was haunting was the lush music of Paganini, the greatest violinist the world has ever known. His music played this historic night on Paganini's own violin, an instrument so exquisite, the 18th century Italian virtuoso called its booming tones the canon.
He'd also called it the voice of the law.
Meaning?
Meaning that once it's heard, there's no argument. It's the greatest.
Its sound so rich, so powerful, Fodor insists this instrument, created in 1742 by master violin maker Joseph Garnieri del Gasseu, far surpasses violins made by the fabled Stradivari.
Stradivari has its merits in that it's a wonderful golden tone throughout. It's like a sunset from horizon to horizon. It's all gold, but Garnieri del Gasseu has many colors, purples, reds, oranges.
Remarkable too, says Fodor, not just because the violin and Paganini were teamed up for 40 years, but also, he says, because Paganini somehow managed to transform the instrument itself.
His constant practice on this instrument and performance through all those years imparted to the molecules of the wood a knowledge that stays with it for hundreds of years.
In short, for $40 million, it was flown to San Francisco last week from Genoa, Italy, where it's kept under lock and key, and from the moment it touched down on American soil, it was surrounded by plainclothes San Francisco police. En route to police headquarters where the violin would be stored, Fodor could scarcely contain his excitement.
2 more minutes and we see it.
So, in the hotel...
Later, as he rehearsed, security monitored his every move as the artist attempted to master not just Paganini's instrument, but also the great violinist technique.
I'm using the fingerings in the way that he used them, in which I've never heard any other violinist utilize in this century.
Doing all that, and with an instrument that has been played only once before in concert in this country, that might intimidate some artists. Not Eugene Fodor.
I feel an amazing pleasure of sharing something wonderful.
I think Gene fancies himself the reincarnation of Paganini, Fodor's father said. Last night, Gene Fodor came very close.
I just hope that if he's looking on somewhere, he would approve.
And why wouldn't he? On this charmed evening, genius of the past and present were one. For today, Bob Fall, NBC News, San Francisco.